There are a number of Christians out there who will argue that the gospel accounts are historical sources and infer that because of this, the contents of those accounts are true by way of being part of a historical document. This is at best a stupid argument, if not blatantly dishonest. While the gospel accounts are without doubt historical documents, this does not make their content true by default. Historical sources have to be categorized, analyzed, and the information in them weighed up. Are they originals, copies? Can we trace a development of a theme over time? Are the authors biased or misinformed? To state simply that the Gospels are historical documents, therefore true, shows a complete lack of care in your epistemology. If you think that the contents of the Gospels are true, and that makes you a convincing case to argue that point, give us a call because the show is about to begin. Welcome, everybody. Today is January the 7th, 2024. I am your host, Richard Gilliver, and joining me today is Jamie The Blind Limey. Jamie, how the devil are you?
Well, other than failing my audition to be the stuntman for the Michelin Man because I'm too homely, I'm fine.
Have you had a good holiday season? Don't throw me off with comments like that.
I'm never ever going to stop that, man. You're just going to have to be ready. Anyway, but yes, I have had an excellent holiday season.
Good. I hope all the people out there today are looking forward to two boiled eggs hosting the show. Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 non-profit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. Okay, so it's time. It is time. We've not done this since last year because we've not had a show since last year of our Talk Heathen to Me segment, where we go into the question of the week. Last year's question, we asked you, complete the question. If God is love, then why hasn't he blank? So number 3 was ETY237. If God is love, why does he keep no record of wrongs? 1 Corinthians 13:5. Instead, he killed the whole human race for doing wrong in the flood. How is that for a contradiction to the Bible stories? Number 2 is Chuck Gaydos 5387. If God is love, why couldn't he have sent Jesus before Noah's flood? Fair enough point, Jamie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Etch-a-Sketch end of the world, like, this is all rubbish, I'm going to get rid of it. Not very loving.
No, not at all. And number 1, we go to Hail Sagan, 8886. I like that name. That's a cool name. It says, God is love, love is blind, Stevie Wonder is blind, Steve 8 Wonder is God. We've got our very own example right
also
here,
God.
Jamie. You and Stevie Wonder are God. We just need a third for a trinity. A third blindy. A third blind. It can't be a blind limey, though, because Stevie Wonder's not a limey. Oh, it's getting confusing, this trinity lock. Let's give it up for a bad job. The prompt for this week is God made blank a sin just to be petty. Enter your best answer below the video in the comments, and next week we will reveal the top 3 answers. But of course, it's Jamie's turn to answer. God made blank a sin just to be petty.
He made looking lustfully a sin to be petty, because, like, you can't stop the intrusive thoughts. Though me, of course, I have my own protection. The person who I'm looking lustfully at will know because I'll be within 1 foot.
It's an interesting one, that, and sin is, of course, or originally meant that thing which displeased God. But God, of course, sent the Holy Spirit down, so the story goes, to impregnate Mary. So did the Holy Spirit not look lustfully? Was it kind of doing the deed like that?
Bit of a cold fish, the old Holy Spirit. They're like, yeah, just gotta get it done.
Get it done, in and out as fast as possible. See you next week. Thanks for the time. Yeah, it's not very. You'd like to think the Bible's supposed to be poetic, and that really does not give a poetic image across, does it?
No, it's something about religion and Christianity specifically that is. But I've never known an ideology that's so fascinated and yet so terrified of something as innocuous as sex. It's like anyway. I don't know.
We, of course, do not do this on our own. We have a wonderful, wonderful team behind us, and that is the crew. So let's go and have a look at that wonderful crew and look at them all. Beautiful, every single one of them, especially the control room. There's nothing like a room with a man in the corner.
Okay. If your room has a man in the corner and you don't know why he's there, then that is a problem.
Yeah, unless you're God, because then it could just be in and out, and
he's in every corner. He is every corner.
He is every corner, indeed. It is season 8. We have been doing this for eight long years, and it's been fun. Every single one of them. This is the first episode of season 8, and we, of course, are starting the new year as we finished it last year with myself and Jamie hosting the show. It's going to be a good one, I feel. If you are a theist and you want to give us a call and talk to us about what you believe and why, if you are a non-theist religious person and want to discuss your religion from a non-theistic perspective, if you want to talk about philosophy or ethics or any of those good things, give us a call. The number is 512-991-9242, or you can visit tiny.cc/call-th. We do have some great voicemails and things that people like to respond to when we put videos up. Let's put a couple of screenshots up. So I'm going to put screenshot 1 up, who says, wow, this guy really picks and chooses his scriptures. People who wish to discredit anything do this. That is referring to myself on a show that we did. I don't feel that I pick and choose scriptures in the way that he's kind of meaning it. Yes, we do go through and pick things out that are troublesome and find problematic. That's not particularly picking and choosing in the way that person is kind of referencing it, though, because what we're doing is just pointing out what a lot of Christians just aren't aware of, really, and or the other Christians like to kind of cherry pick and excuse. Jamie, what's your opinion on that?
I am sick and tired of the whole, but you got to take it in context, or it's historical, or whatever. I mean, obvious things like slavery and that kind of stuff. And it's like, do we though? Really, do we though? Because there's never been a time in history when the horrible things of the Bible have been actually good. They may have happened and people may have justified them back then, but we can look back and go, no, that's not moral, and it's definitely not moral now. So how about we actually call a spade and just not try and excuse it away with context?
Yeah, and it's really strange because a lot of the context doesn't actually work in their favor. When you look at things like Numbers and you look at I've heard people mention before when you talk about that verse in Numbers where God orders for the entire men, women, children, even the animals
the
to be
Midianites.
slaughtered. Yeah, apart from the virgin girls who should be taken as spoils of war. And people say, well, look at the context. Well, let's look at the context, because if you go beyond the problematic bit that people like me apparently cherry pick, if you go beyond that, God actually tells the people that he wants his share of those virgin girls for himself, and they should be delivered to the priests. It gets worse. If you take the context into account, it gets much, much worse.
Yeah. And then people say, well, that's all Old Testament, the New Testament, the New Covenant, etc. I'm like, yeah, but very rarely in the New Testament can you see anything that can even be construed as a denouncing of the Old. covenant of the Old Testament. Also, Jesus says things like, not a jot or tittle of the law shall be changed until all things come to pass. And even certain New Testament entries, such as Titus 2, still say slaves obey your masters and that kind of crap. So I'm like, come on, your book's bad.
Your book's bad. Come on, just admit it. Just admit it. Don't try and get out of it by accusing us of cherry picking when we're merely pointing things out. There's a great line in the Exodus. I think it's Exodus where Noah floods the world, isn't it? And
No, it's Genesis.
Genesis, yes, that's right. Sorry. God points out that he puts the rainbow in the sky. Now, if you ask a Christian why they put the rainbow in the sky, they say because it forms part of a covenant that God makes, which is true. But there's also a second part to that, which is convenient left out. Well, let's talk about this cherry picking thing for a minute. There's also a second part to that, which is always conveniently left out of that. And that's when God puts it there, not just as a covenant, but he puts the rainbow in the sky as a reminder of the covenant to himself. God is clearly prone to forgetfulness. The rainbow is a proverbial string around the finger to remind God of the thing that he did.
I mean, I don't know about forgetfulness. I think it's more impulse control. It's like, well, I'm going to kill him. No. I said I wouldn't, but I want to, but I won't.
Yeah, so moving on from me, screenshot 2. This one's for you, Jamie. And it says, no, you are not a prophet of God and not very bright.
Guilty on both counts, but I don't have to be bright to be able to spot the hypocrisies, the fallacies, the immoral things. A child could, which is why children don't read their Bibles. They are read their Bibles. Their pastors tell them the stories, and they're usually watered down versions as well. It's just I don't claim to be prophet of God. I don't know where you got that from. Oh, it's because of the bears. I remember. I'm not allowed to sick bears on kids because I'm not a prophet of God, apparently. Just being bald isn't enough. Well, how fucking convenient.
No, just being a baldy isn't enough. If only it was, because there's nothing I'd like more than to walk around sicking bears on people, because I am a prophet of God. It would be lovely. A bald prophet of God.
I'm sure there's pedants out there going, oh, Elisha didn't do that. God did it as a response to his cursing. And I'm like, oh, okay, fair enough. God did it then. So Elisha's not evil. God is. Okay, cool.
We've got to the bottom of it. We have got a. I'll read this out now while we're just chatting. We have got a super chat from Dark Wolfie Games. Thank you very, very much, Dark Wolfie Games. I was chatting to Dark Wolfie Games in the TikTok pre-show. So if you are on TikTok, you like Dark Wolfie Games, can join us on the TikTok pre-show from around 1:30 before the show starts. And Dark Wolfie Games sends $5. Thank you, Dark Wolfie Games, and says, love all the episodes. Have watched the ACA for 23 years. Used to tour and sing for various theist vocal groups, but have been a lifelong atheist. That's really interesting. I find that really interesting that you kind of can have that. But I do that myself. I don't sing for theist vocal groups, but I do work with theist people. And when it comes to the kind of religion, philosophy, and ethics and religious studies stuff I'm doing, and I work alongside them. So it's really I like it when people can kind of do things that they have an interest in, or an academic kind of bent towards, and still have this kind of this non-belief and be able to do that. And it just shows. We get a lot of people thinking that, if they call these shows, it's going to be an angry, shouty match. And it's not, because we can talk to each other. Theists and atheists can have conversations without it being angry and shouty and nasty.
And to be fair, yes, some of our tone in the last 10 minutes about talking about the Bible may sound quite derisive, but that's because we are coming at it from a sort of critical literary perspective. Like, we don't believe that any of even if people may have been historical, we don't believe a lot of the events actually happened, especially Old Testament stuff. It's a story. But we can critically analyze the characters of this story and then get really, really wigged out when people say, no, these characters are real. I believe they're moral and I'm going to follow their example and their rules. So, yeah, we're not haters. We are just worried.
Yeah. On that note, we have a theist who has called us, Anthony, who says, I believe in God, and he came from the live chats. So let's talk to Anthony. Anthony, how are you?
I'm well. How about yourself?
Very well, sir. Thank you for calling the show. What is it you'd like to talk about?
Well, you know how YouTube has these algorithms, and I guess they target you. So I received a YouTube video from the gentleman who was asking, is God real? And the means by which he uses to communicate don't seem like the best possible means. And so I was going back and forth with different people who were challenging me. And eventually, and that began, I believe, Friday. And then this morning, I got an email saying, feel free to call the show at 1 p.m. On Sundays to discuss why you think we should convent. Okay?
Yeah, so why do you think that we should be convinced? And let's start from the beginning. Why do you think that we should be convinced that God exists?
Wonderful. Good. Okay. Back and around the year, and I'm not going to go through the Old Testament, New Testament. I'll give some historical perspective as to at least why consideration should be given. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just going to give some historical data and let you make your decision based upon that. All right? Back around the year 1837, 1838, a couple of gentlemen had taken the Bible and they, through what is called exegesis, they looked at a principle called the day-year principle. And it's a prophetic principle that tells us that based on the Jewish calendar, which is 360 years in a year, 360 days in a year, 12 months in that year, 30 days each month. Based on that principle, when the Jews came out of Egypt and they were disobedient to God, he assigned a principle called the day-year principle, a day for a year. Every day that the Jews were out in the wilderness looking for the land that God had already given them, there were 40 days that they spent. And so God told them that because you came back from the wilderness and refused to take the land that I gave you, I didn't need your help to get the land. I gave the land to you. But you still determined that even after you went and saw the land was a land of milk and honey, you determined that you weren't going to take the land. So God decided that because that particular generation were going to be disobedient, he said, I'm going to allow you to stay in the wilderness for 40 years, and you're going to die in the wilderness before the next generation comes into the promised land. So he established this principle called the day-year principle. He proved it out several times in the Bible. He proved it out when the Jews were in Babylonian captivity. They were supposed to be in captivity for 70 years because they had proved that they would not keep the Sabbath as he had told them. So we fast forward to these two gentlemen who were looking at reestablishing or reintroducing the day-year principle to mankind, telling people that this day-year principle still held water. Now, prior to that, there were seven crusades where the Roman Catholic Church sent the Christians to battle and combat the Muslims, the Mohammedans, the Ottoman Empire. And those seven crusades, each one of them, where the Christian nations of Europe were trying to kick the Ottoman Empire out of as far west Europe as Spain and all the way over into the Arabian desert into India. And those seven attempts by the Christians proved to be failures. They tried hard as they could, but every time they lost to the Ottoman Empire. So it was as if the Catholic Church and the Christians could not do, and that God would not help them do what they thought they should be able to do. They should have been able to conquer the Muslims because the Muslims were these heathens. And so along come these two men. One man's name was William Miller, and another man's name was Josiah Litch. And they predicted that on a particular day, based on the day-year principle, that the Ottoman Empire, after 700 years of crusades, that the Ottoman Empire was going to finally come to an end. And now this was an amazing prediction.
So can I just hold you up there?
I was just going to jump in at that point too, but I'll let you go, James, since you beat me to the bullet.
So there's a couple of things that I'd like to step in. A few things. One, the Ottoman Empire is a modern thing. Like before that, it was the Achaemenids, the Sassanids, the Persians. There was lots of different Muslim empires and empires before that. Like several empires rose and fell in those 700 years. Even if we were to grant that it was like Muslims ruled that area for 700 years, every empire eventually falls, and Muslims are still in that area. Turkey is still a Muslim country. Saudi Arabia is a Muslim theocracy. And the thing is, even if we granted all that, it still could be construed as either coincidence and post hoc rationalization. And even if you could convince us that, or we accepted that these there was no other way that these historical events could have played out, and it isn't a coincidence, that still doesn't bring us any closer to it being the doings of a god. Like this whole historical, mathematical pattern matching day-year theory that you're presenting is supposed to be a convincing argument for the existence of God, but I'm not seeing it. Where does that connection come?
Well, if you would allow me, I will finish. I will continue. So the book of Revelation, chapter 9, introduces, the book of Revelation was written around the year 90 to 92 AD by John, the apostle who the Bible says Christ loved. He wrote it on the island of Patmos, and he gave the book of Revelation. Now, the book of Revelation, contrary to most beliefs of many, and I will not say that this is a belief of atheists. This is a belief of many people who claim Christianity as their faith. They say and they believe that the book of Revelation is a sealed book, but the very word revelation comes from the root word reveal. And, here you have people who say they believe in the Bible, but then when they get to the last chapter, because they haven't taken the time to study it out, they say that it's sealed, but the Bible says reveal. The book, the Revelation, is revealed. So we get to the chapter 9, and chapter 9 begins to give us the history told in future, okay, the history of the Ottoman Empire told in the future. And that history begins around 622 AD with the beginning of Islam under Muhammad. Okay, Islam has two different factions. Its first faction is the Saracens or the Arabians or the Bedouins, and they were the first group of Islam. And then that particular group was...
Can I answer that? Can I just interrupt you, because I feel like we're kind of rambling on a little bit.
I'm not rambling. This is history, and the only way you can understand the Bible.
So the problem is the question I asked you when you very first came on the line was, how, what is it that you think would convince us that God exists? So far, you've made a couple of kind of rambling and almost incoherent statements. For example, when you were talking about the Crusades. The Crusades weren't just a series of nations just running in, trying to get rid of the Ottomans and failing miserably on every occasion. It was far more nuanced than that. Far more nuanced. There were great a great many times where, land was won, land was lost, different peoples were beaten, the Christians were on top, the Muslims were on top. There were even accounts of, Christians, siding with the Muslims because it was more beneficial with them. It's just not as black and white as you're making it out. And it's really problematic when you're trying to boil something down and making it so simplistic to try and make a point. Because when the question is, what will convince us that God exists? This isn't going to do it. Because you're being so black and white. You're missing out so many very, very important details to kind of push this narrative. And that's not convincing.
Yeah.
So without, sorry, Jamie, I'll let you jump in just shortly. Without kind of, just rambling on about this stuff, is this something you really find that would convince somebody who does not believe in God that, bear in mind, there's a lot of legwork to do here. You're not just convincing us that our God exists. You're trying to convince us here that a specific God exists. And on top of that, you're also denying a lot of other Christians because they don't have the same interpretation of you. So, and that to me is not going to be something that's convincing either, because you're not presenting any kind of yardstick, which is saying, I've planted this yardstick in the ground. This clearly shows that my interpretation is correct and their interpretation is wrong. You're merely saying that their interpretation is wrong. Therefore, I am right. I'm going to shut up. I'm going to let Jamie ask you his question, and then I will let you respond.
Yeah, just one very simple question. Because this, again, granting this whole theory, this whole convincing theory to convince other Christians, let alone us, when did the Ottoman Empire start?
So the Ottoman Empire as an empire began around 1453 AD, when Empire Diocletian was to receive the empire from its brother John Pellicosius, who died. He was the last of the Caesars to die in the Greek Empire, in the Eastern Roman Empire.
Okay, so that's cool. That's all I need to know. Like you kept saying Ottoman Empire and then referring to Muhammad in the 700s. So I was wondering if we were missing a gap. I'm now convinced that you've got your historicities down. But how is it convincing?
Okay, here's the thing. The Ottoman Empire did not become an empire until the Ottomans took over Islam. It started off as Islam, but it was under the Arabs or the Saracens. Then the transition happens, the Ottoman come in, and they take over. So everyone who's Islamic is not an Arab. The Ottomans, the Turks are not Arabs.
Yeah.
The Turks are not Arabs. Okay, so it started out under the umbrella of the Arabs, but then the Ottomans came in and basically became a more aggressive version of Islam, and that was in 1453 AD. Now, your question about, I'm not trying to convince other Christians right or wrong. I'm just telling you the historical, from what the scripture says. This is historical information, and you can look at Gibbon's.
No. You're telling us your interpretation of what scripture says.
Yeah,
and that's a very, very important point to make.
Yeah, you're saying that Revelation is predicting these things. That's not historical record. That is an interpretation of prophecy, and these prophecies tend to be real vague. So draw those lines for us, simple and clean, if you could. All
right, good. So when, as I was alluding to, the day-year principle, when the gentleman came to a group just like your group, just exactly like your group, they were called the Infidel Club of America. And they looked and they said the same things you were saying back in the late 1830s. And they were saying that we have heard so many people look at prophecy and tell us, oh, yeah, that's what happened. Oh, yeah, that's what happened. It's easy to say that's what happens after it's happened. But in 1838, these men predicted that on the exact date, August 11th, 1840, the Ottoman Empire would give up its freedom, or give up its self-determination, turn that self-determination over to the Christian nations of Europe. And no one believed it would happen. It was predicted in October.
When was this prediction made?
1838.
So it was made in a time, a few years before. So they could have realistically, yeah. So
Say it again.
So why my wife has got? Okay, I'm coming on to it in a second. My wife has a degree in politics. She has several times over the last few years predicted events that have happened politically because she has that knowledge. And she's made predictions 5-6 years into the future. She's not a prophet. She's not making prophecies. She's using data available at the time and making a prediction, which has, and a lot of cases have come right. In some cases, they haven't. So basically, what you're telling me is these guys were alive at the time these events were happening, made a prediction and happened to get it right. How can you demonstrate that is a prophecy? That is something which has come from God, from the power of God, and is not just a prediction.
Because when the men predicted it, historically, the European nations lived in fear, constant fear of the Ottoman Empire.
So what? That
That
doesn't mean that they can't predict something which is happening in their own life, in their own times, which is unfolding at the time.
And
that's not demonstration that is from God.
Okay, and from your interpretation, it's not. But back in those days, it was. Back in those days, the members of what was called. Let me finish. Back in those days.
No, Anthony, let me finish.
Jamie is going to talk.
Let me finish.
You don't get to just say, let me finish.
So
Jamie is going to talk. Then you may respond.
The historicity of this is really starting to rub me up the wrong way, because you're talking about the Ottoman Empire giving themselves over to those Christian nations in 18 whatever the hell. So as far as I'm aware, the strongest, most powerful and biggest sect of Christianity is the Catholic Church, which resides in Rome, which is in Italy. And on what side of the First World War did Italy fight on? Was it on the same side as the Ottomans? Because I don't think it was. So how do you square that circle?
I guess I'm confused in terms of you saying what side, because Italy was on one side, but the side that the Ottoman was on was the same side as Germany in World War I. And
so
that's the whole purpose in history, the whole purpose of, and most people don't understand, the whole purpose of World War I, the whole reason, the thing that really started is what was called the Baghdad-Berlin Railroad, where the Germans were trying to establish a railroad system between Baghdad and Berlin.
I thought it was the assassination of Franz Ferdinand in Serbia. I think you're really trying to mold the events to your theory rather than the other way around.
But that's your opinion. I can show you the historical precedent, and there are many books that are written by people who were specialists in this particular area who prove that the Baghdad Railroad was the thing that facilitated the beginning of World War I. Now,
so how do you square that with the letters between the premiers of Russia and Germany, who were cousins, beseeching each other not to go to war over the problem in the Balkans, and how Bismarck predicted that the touch point of World War I with the Balkans? I don't believe your interpretation of history. I'm sorry. I'm really not buying it.
Did Miller make any other interpretations? Let's say, for example, about the end of the world.
I don't believe yours. That doesn't mean that you're right or I'm wrong. You can say you don't believe, and I can say I don't believe, and neither one. It doesn't prove either one. But I have the historical data sitting in front of me.
Did Miller make any other predictions about the end of the world? In addition to this Ottoman Empire?
No, he did not. He didn't have to make any more predictions.
Yes, he
according
did.
To script.
Yes, he did, sir. He predicted that Jesus would come back. In fact, and he had predicted the end of the world to be sometime in 1843. Why is it that he got that prediction wrong and this other one right? If it's a revelation from God.
Are you going to ask? Do you allow people to ask questions, or do you interject? Because I don't
I've
think
just
that's the way
literally
you have
been
a
quiet and
dialogue.
allowed you the time to answer.
Well, if you don't cut me off, I
What?
can answer your question. And what you're asking is, Miller predicted that Jesus was coming, and my answer is this: Miller misunderstood the what is called the sanctuary, which when God told Moses to make a sanctuary, he said, "Let them build me a sanctuary that I may dwell amongst them, according to the pattern that I showed you in heaven." So Moses was taken into vision, and he was shown a pattern. Any woman who sews clothing, who makes clothing, uses a pattern.
Did Miller predict the end of the world, sir? Did Miller predict the end of the world?
Yes, he did.
Did he get that? Did he get that prediction correct? Did he get that correction correct?
No, he did not.
No, he did not.
No, he did
so
not.
how are we ascertaining the power of prophecy that Miller had when he gets some things correct and some things incorrect?
Because Miller never claimed to be a prophet.
So you're just making the statement that he was a prophet based on the one thing that he got correct and ignoring all the things he got wrong?
No, I did not. I never said anything to the effect. He interpreted prophecy. There's a difference between a person interpreting prophecy and a person claiming to be a prophet. Miller never claimed to be a prophet. You were the one who said that he claimed to be a prophet. No, he did not. What he did was he took the prophetic interpretation and told the world about it. That didn't make him a prophet. That made him the person who was conveying what the word of God said.
Sir, this whole thing, be quiet. This whole thing started with me asking you if you could give us something that would convince us that God existed. And you started by telling us about these interpretations of prophecy that Miller made. And you've been arguing for quite some time that, these interpretations are correct. And yet he also made interpretations of prophecy that were incorrect. So why should anything he says be taken seriously as any form of evidence that God exists?
Because that's why the Bible says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. So in other words,
wonderful. So we can just hope. We can just hope that somebody who gets some stuff right and some stuff wrong, that stuff which it fits in with our interpretation of the Bible, we'll just have faith that it's correct.
I'm sure you're aware of our position on faith as a path to truth. The whole faith is the evidence of things unseen. We don't think that's a good way to the truth. We've had that conversation multiple times. So I'm not going to go too far into that unless you want to, but after you, Rich.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. Is there anything else you have, Anthony, that you think might persuade us that God actually exists? Because this is a really, really poor kind of line of conviction that you have. You're quoting a guy who gets some things wrong and some things right, and the things he gets right could just equally be predicted by people who aren't claiming to be interpreting scripture and just have a knowledge of current events and are observing things and take the time to do that. As I stated, my wife has made several predictions in politics. She has a degree in politics. She's made several predictions in politics which have come to fruition. She's not a prophet. And I have no reason to think that this person is either a prophet or interpreting prophecy to any degree that has any conviction that God exists. So it's a very, very poor line of reasoning. Is there anything that you actually think, anything other than this, that you think is convincing as a line of argument that God exists?
If you're not going to let a person finish their thought, if you're going to interject your opinion, into what is said without giving the guest an opportunity to talk, then this is not a dialogue. It's a monologue. This is
No,
not
sir. You have had.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
No,
yes,
you have
because you
had
told me about
plenty of opportunity to talk, sir. You have had plenty of opportunity to talk. I keep giving you opportunities to talk. But what happens in a dialogue is when something is taking something way off track or something is saying something that needs correcting, the other people have interjected. That is why we have interjected. Now I'm giving you the opportunity to speak. As we did when you first called, and we didn't interject for a good few minutes. We just let you talk until we first interjected. I'm going to do that again now. Is there anything else other than this, which we are not convinced by, that you think is convincing and would be convincing to us for evidence of the existence of God?
Thank you. Will you allow me to talk without interrupting? Thank you. When there are 14 generations from Adam until Noah, Adam died a few years before Noah was born. All of Noah's uncles, all of Noah's grandfathers had children. All of them had children. Noah's father, Lamech, had Noah, and then after Noah, he had other children. However, the other children, as well as his cousins, because men were living to as long as 900 years old. Now, you figure from Adam until Noah, 14 generations, there were a lot of people who lived at the time. Historically, archaeology has proven that there was a worldwide flood. All the continents...
No, they have not. No, they have not. I'm done. Richard, you can talk to this guy if you like. I am done. No, there was no flood.
Yes, they have.
Right, so, Anthony, look, here's the problem. We keep asking for evidence of, things that you can give us that would, come across as evidence for convincing us that God exists. You've just started talking about Noah and people living to great, great ages. That is not something that is demonstrated to be the case anywhere in history to those ages laid down in the Bible. So already we have a problem, because it's not just a case of you laying out that the Bible says this. It's not as simple as that, unfortunately. Just like it's not just the case for a Buddhist to say that the Buddha can travel instantaneously by outstretching his arm and travel to the heavenly realms. You can't just make claims that are counter to what we know to be fact. What you have to do is demonstrate those claims. So if you're going to say, the Bible says that these people live to these great ages, you can't just say that on reliance of the Bible. You have to demonstrate that people can or ever have lived to these great ages. These are the things that are going to be convincing. Just simply telling us what your holy book says is going to be no more convincing than a Muslim telling me what the Quran says, or a Buddhist reading from the Tipitaka to me. Those things in and of themselves are not convincing. And the whole point of this conversation is because you said you wanted to try and convince us that God existed.
What is your proof to the contrary? What do you have to hold up and say, this is why I know what I'm saying?
Nobody has lived to 700 fucking years old, is my proof to the contrary, sir. Nobody ever in the history of the world has been demonstrated to live to such a great age. The Bible is, on that point, until shown otherwise, categorically wrong. That is my proof to the contrary.
And the global flood is, by all laws of physics, physically impossible.
Why are you cursing? Why are you so upset?
Because you're making no sense.
You could afford, if you have the truth, you can afford to be unanxious and unagitated. When you have the truth, it doesn't agitate you to hear something contrary to it. I'm not upset.
No, you are upset because you're the one who keeps complaining that we cut you off.
You're the one cursing. You're the one that's cursing, and the two of you are ganging up on me.
Sir.
And
I curse in daily life. That is not a demonstration that I am upset.
Who's upset? You're upset. It's a shame that you're upset because you can't get your point across without being anxious.
Absolutely brilliant.
Okay,
right. Shut up and tell me where in history a person has been demonstrated to live more than 700 years.
Not in the Bible.
Calm down, because calm down.
You
okay.
Tell me what I have asked.
Calm down.
Right.
Calm down. Take a breather. Because you're showing that you don't have anything.
You, sir, are muted, and you are going to remain muted while I finish this sentence. I'm going to ask you the question again, and I want an answer to this question, or I'm going to drop the call. Where in history, as a human, been demonstrated, this doesn't mean just a claim in a holy book, where in history, as a human, been demonstrated to live for more than... Oh, he's gone. He's gone. He's decided to go.
I'm sorry.
This people...
I'm losing my shit. It's so funny.
Is what happens... This, people, is what happens when people come onto this show, which I'm going to call my show because I am the producer thereof. So I'm going to call it my show, even though we have a great, wonderful team that produces this. This is what happens when you come on and start telling the hosts what they are going to do. No, when I ask you a question, a simple question, and a perfectly reasonable question, I expect an answer. I do not expect you to tell me to calm down. That is not the way you are going to make progress. Jamie, any comments on that caller before we move on?
Just apologies for my lack of professionalism there in a little bit, and I'm a little bit agitated in my seat. I try and be calm. That's kind of why I'm supposed to be here, as a sort of calm voice. But when someone completely disregards the sort of consensus on historicity. And I've done a bit of study into the beginnings of World War One, considering that our country was like involved in all that crap, and then says there is a history. Sorry, I can't say it without laughing. There is archaeological evidence of a worldwide flood, and I'm like, no, there fucking ain't. Sorry. So no, I can't take anything that guy says seriously at all. His credibility was shot through as soon as he said that. That's why I said I was done. Because he says something, he makes a bold, blatant, untrue, unprovable, and as far as we're aware, physically impossible statement. And then says, oh, why are you getting agitated? It's just because you're talking bollocks, that's why.
Yeah, talking bollocks to two English guys just isn't really, it's not going to cut the mustard. We grow up talking bollocks, especially the locations we grew up in. And
if you squint into your hair, we look like a couple of talking bollocks. But anyway, enough Britishisms.
Yeah, we have. Let's get down to business. We have been running our brick fundraiser for a while, and while we'll be completing phase 1 at the end of January, our featured brick this week comes from Kevin from Florida, who engraved "In support of the American dream. Not only freedom of religion, but freedom from religion." Thank you so much for your purchase, Kevin. We couldn't agree with the sentiment more, and you can get your purchase in by the end of the month at tiny.cc/ACA bricks. Of course, we also have limited edition t-shirts where you can go to tiny.cc/merchaca to get those before the month is over for the featured t-shirt. And the ACA wants you to know what is going on in our community. And for that, we've got an updated website. Head to www.atheist-community.org, where you can learn about the organization itself, its policies, and how you can get involved and how to shout at annoying callers. Following Talk Heathen on TikTok is easy. You can go to Talk Heathen, and that's talk, not talk. And join us for our pre-show lives at the ACA TikTok. That's the Atheist Community of Austin. I'm going to get another call in a minute. I just want to read a couple of these super chats out. First, we've got quite a few in. Frankenstein Dean sends us $10 and says a reliable recipe for kosher 9-grain bread can be found in Ezekiel 4:9. That's all I found to be reliable. And Chakuseke sends $4.99. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. And says faith is a pathway to faith. A veritable Europorosis, aka a faith circle jerk. Miranda Rensberger, our old friend, sends $5 and says, in the Silmarillion, a good chunk of the continent gets submerged under the sea. Therefore, Atlantis is real. I still stand by the fact that the Silmarillion is the best written religious book of all time. It's absolutely fantastic. Some kind of dickhead sends $5 and says, pro tip for callers, don't use the time you are given to talk to complain about how you're not given the time to talk. I concur, especially when you are given time to talk. Jamie, any comments on any of those?
Thank you so much for your contributions. We couldn't do what we do without you guys. And yes, there's no, the whole thing of oh, can I talk now? Can I talk now? And saying, oh, why are you getting stressed? It's like getting up in someone's face and saying, why are you getting stressed? I'm like, because you're up on my face and being a dickhead. So, of course I'm going to get reaction here. There we go.
Yeah, let's take Josh from Georgia, who says he has thoughts about the validity of the Gospels. Josh, thank you for your call. What do you want to talk about?
Hey, how's it going? I've enjoyed the ACA experience for almost 23 years. This is the first time I've ever called in. And
wow.
I'm actually also the Dark Wolfie Games guy that's been contributing.
Hey.
But just wanted to give you all some inside look. And just real quick, if I can rapid fire on the last caller. There's not enough water that has ever existed on the planet for there to be a global flood in the past 250,000 years. Nobody's ever existed over 120 that we've provided any evidence for. And 3, any good plans or any good prophecy will have date and time. There are no good plans that leave questions as to what your actions should be. But anyway, we could continue to the validity of the Gospels if we wish.
Yeah, please do.
Well, so let's talk about it. Of course, the New Testament being obviously in Greek, and within the Greek Gospels, obviously, I know one of my other favorite hosts, Jamie, likes to talk about a failed apostle or a failed apocalyptic preacher. I believe there are 3 because you got the early times, Jesus talking about, was it humble meek? And then you got hippie Jesus who went and met with everybody, who allowed the harlot to wash his feet. And then you also have the final apocalyptic Jesus. And the only reason why I say that is because the obvious root originally is Yeshua. In Yeshua, we have found a number of tombs in Israel in what used to be the Sinai Peninsula, where we found over 91 tombs of Yeshua, which is Jehovah or Yahshua or Joshua, past the Greek patronage. So it's sort of interesting to me that the Gospels mainly speak from people we can't confirm, and that we can't really. There's no external evidence that a lot of those apostles or people who spoke in those Gospels even existed. We have no exacting evidence of those different stories. Any of the 500 witnesses, they didn't appear, those types of things. So to me, it's always been sort of a grain of salt when we're talking about the Gospels. It's more of a book says a thing, so let's plan our entire lives around a book says a thing.
Mm.
Does that sound like evidence?
No, it doesn't. What do you think about in my opening statement to the show, I was talking about the number of Christians who I've come across who will argue that the gospel accounts are historical sources. Did you accept them as historical source material, even though what's contained in them is not demonstrated? Or would you object even to that, and why?
Well, we have to look towards any external evidence or corroborating evidence that is an antithesis to it. So the one idea is that we actually can confirm, if you want to travel outside of the Bible, that a supposed Jesus existed. We don't know which one or where, but in the Quran, it also talks about it. And even, if he was so great, other than just within the regional texts, there would be external texts because his word would have traveled far and wide, correct? So that's where there's no true corroborating evidence, because then you would have to trust another book says a thing, and we can't even guarantee that, the Quran was exactly put together in the finest form. And we look towards the Romans, for all their legal context, what they would keep are wax tablets for their notes for all of the different court proceedings. We can't find any of that, because if it were for the supposed Jesus, the following Caesars or emperors would have kept those documents. They would have been praised. They would have been the single most important thing if this Jesus existed 50 to 100 years after his death. And then, we look towards the story of the crucifixion. It's not exactly a super uncommon thing to be crucified. I mean, there's 2,000 Jews who were also crucified near the same time, historically, that we could see in the same time frame. Hundreds of thousands of people were executed in that. And if he was so dangerous to the Romans, he would not have just been crucified. He would have been drawn and quartered as well, because that was their favorite for apostates to the current reign. So we have none of this other evidence that would have been historically correlative. So that would be my sort of question, is what external sources can we derive, other than stories of people hundreds of years past his death saying some great guy existed, maybe Jesus, I don't know.
Well, I'm going to switch gears from the previous call thing and do something that we've done on this show for, and kind of steelman the Christian historicity position, because I am willing to grant the historicity of the Bible in all the mundane facts, because it doesn't make much difference to me. Yeah, maybe there was a guy called Jesus. A couple of reasons. One, all of history is based on incomplete documents, sometimes hearsay, sometimes just eyewitness accounts, which are very rarely reliable. So more or less a degree. And I do agree that there's very little in the way of outside sources. I mean, people point to Josephus and stuff like that. But anyway, but even to Steelman, we'll give that. The one thing about the gospel specifically and the crucifixion story in particular that really gets me is that while you could justify that, the inconsistencies between those stories, because there are several, are just omission or slight reinterpretations of the actual events. There's one particular thing, I can't remember which of the Gospels it is, I think it might be John, that declares that when the people go to the tomb, the rock is still in place, and then a great quake happens, or lightning or a quake, and they see the stone moved. Whereas in the other three, the stone has already been moved, and that's a straight up contradiction. You can't. That's not can be explained by omission. But no, was the stone there or not? So even when I'm steelmanning, I still can't get over that.
As much as I love British steel, I will say that the other problems to that story is who exactly showed up. Was it Mary? Was it both Marys? Was it Mary and Saul? Was it? There's a bunch of contradicting stories, obviously, throughout the Gospels. However,
I can imagine a Christian saying, they didn't mention that everyone was there. They were just talking about the most important people. When the Lord of the Rings talks about Frodo when he's walking with the Fellowship, they don't always list out that everyone's there. It's just kind of implied. So I can, like I say, I'm trying to get into the head of an apologist here. But that one fact, or that one contradiction of, is the stone there or is it not? That's not omission. That's not inference. We've
already heard some wonderful apology about, how that because the book says a thing that, the Ottoman Turks, who, in the 1830s already had a failing economy, already had a failing war effort. Their conscription is at the highest rate that it ever was. Everybody was unhappy. We already heard those arguments of how somehow somebody would get it right, that entire government would fail. But let's, poking holes in the story of that. I mean, if we're looking at the book as a whole, and these prophecies don't have a specific date nor time, what uses it as a guide plan would be my question. Whether or not the book has a thing or has some even remotely historical text, if the idea is to guide your life around it, if I need to know how to build, a barn, I'm not going to rely on some wonderful sophistry, poetry to help me plan for that. I've got to get angles, I've got to get joists, I've got to get all this other stuff. There's going to be some details we need that we just don't get, unfortunately.
Fair. Yep. What say you, Richard?
I think the thing is, we've got this. I come from the angle, especially with the Gospels, that we have this. I think it's easy to kind of disprove the Gospel accounts just from coming from a psychological perspective, and we don't. Even if we took them, even if we took the stories as gospel. I see what I did there. Even if we took the stories as true on the face value, sorry, Jamie. The thing is, we could disprove them using psychology, because all of the accounts can be shown to be flawed. Using psychology, we can show that these accounts may have been and likely were, in fact, flawed psychological perceptions that were occurring, flawed memory,
and even the psychology of the moment that they had wax tablets, they had clay tablets, they had etchers who could etch in stone. The most amazing story of this man who sacrificed himself for the Israelites, who we can't even prove were in great number in Egypt, but that's a side story. So they had all of these tools to mark that down, and no one did it. Not even the Romans, when they made it their state religion, which, is the only reason why Christianity exists today, or it would have been just some weird Hebrew cult back in the, BCEs, right? So I agree. It's psychologically the most important event in the history of man, so-called. Nobody else got it down. And that someone is telling to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can agree. There's, like I say, I could try and steal man as much as I can, but again, there's just so much stuff that just trips us up.
Again, the British Steel, you're two of my 4 favorite hosts that have ever been on this program. I appreciate you giving me the time to ramble. And
there's only ever been 3 in total. Sorry, thank you. I appreciate that. We appreciate that very much. And
you guys have a great
field. I also appreciate the British Steel joke as well. Thank you for your call. Really do appreciate it. Thank you for calling.
Hey, and stay calm. You'll be all right. We'll
I'm dropping you now. I'm dropping you for telling me to stay calm. No, listen, it's great that you found the time, Josh, to call after listening for so many years. And we do appreciate your 20 plus years of listening to the show. That is phenomenal. And that you're still finding entertainment in it, and that you're finding time to call after listening for so long. We really, really do appreciate that, and very much appreciate the kind comments as well. Let's do the top 5 patrons, Jamie. Are you ready?
Yeah, okie dokie. Speaking of people who we appreciate, our top 5 patrons, we got Dingleberry Jackson, still a fantastic name. Oops, all singularity, still a fantastic name. Devor Valgin, excellent. Kalevi Helveti, and of course, Left in the Leaves. Thank you very much, all of you. And an honourable mention to Daniel and Mara. You are all fantastic, wonderful people. And again, we couldn't do what we do without you.
Absolutely. I want to just say before we take the next call, to the person I'm talking to in the chat about, I don't usually read the chat, but this caught my eye, about Buddhism. Give us a call. Let's have that conversation about whether Buddhism contains supernatural elements or whether it's just a state of mind. I would really like that call. Buddhism has been my area of study for well over 10 years from a scriptural perspective, and from a meditation perspective for well over 20 years. So I would love to have that conversation with you. In the meantime, we do have Andrew on, who wants to talk about Apostle Paul beating out all the other philosophers. Andrew, how are you?
Greetings. Happy Sunday.
Thank you very much. Same to you, sir. So give us the kind of a rundown of what it is exactly you want to talk about.
Yeah, since I was a teenager, I was obsessively following basically the philosophy of the Apostle Paul, who was extremely apocalyptic and just otherworldly thinking. And he's basically beat out all the other philosophers. So, like, for over 2,000 years, and like, I have kids now, and life is really rough. So like, living out his teachings isn't very practical anymore. But again, I guess Epicurus would be more practical. His teaching should have made the Bible, but since Paul beat out all the other philosophies, isn't his like the right one, like the one that has divine intervention?
Okay, so let's. I want to kind of get into this a little bit. I'm not an expert on Paul. It's not something I've massively looked into. I'm very interested in the statement. Paul beat out all the other philosophers. Can you break that down and explain what you mean by that? Because that, on the surface of it, seems a little bit incoherent to me. I'm not quite understanding what you're meaning by it. So if you can kind of break it down a little bit.
Yeah, like we have like hedonism, Epicureanism, and like these other ancient Greek thoughts, like, but the one that created Western culture, the one that shaped the way we view the world is the New Testament, the Apostle Paul, and Christianity. So it really beat out all other philosophies, and it shaped like our world. So
I want to push back on that
wrote the New Testament.
Sorry, Andrew. I just want to kind of push back on that on a couple of counts. The first one in a similar way to I did with the first caller, in the respect that, I don't think we can say that, the Apostle Paul shaped kind of the way things are now in society. I think that's far too simplistic a take on it, and we have this kind of this huge thing. Of course, Christianity has had a great influence on Western society as we know it, but it's not just a case that that's come from the philosophy of Paul. In fact, in that time, there have been, a great many kind of philosophies and ideas and theological ideas that have been fighting against each other, even within Christianity. And that's if we completely discount all of the religious influence, even within Christianity, that have kind of ebbed and, and grown, and some have had prominence and they've gone down a little bit. We've had, great battles within Christianity, both theologically and, actual battles, because of these different, kind of ideas, these different philosophical ideas. Even if we just look at Christianity as it is today, as a blanket thing. I'm a member of a few Christian pages on social media, and one of the things I know on those pages more than anything else is the amount of Christians who argue with each other about whose interpretation of philosophy and of theology and of scripture is correct. And again, we saw that with the first caller telling other Christians that their interpretation was wrong. And so I think that on its own is a problem kind of for what you're saying, because there's no way we can trace the way society is now solely to the philosophy of Paul, because there's been so many different influences on it within Christianity and outside of Christianity that it'd be impossible to trace that as a line of thought. I think secondly, for me as a kind of, and I'm not a historian, my academic study is in religious studies, but from the kind of historical side of doing those religious studies, one of the things that really stands out for me, the second of the two great shaping things of Christianity that I would call the two kind of great things that have shaped it over its history. The second of those is the influence that Plato had on early Christianity. And, the idea that, kind of souls go to heaven, and heaven can be this perfect realm. These are all Platonic ideas. These aren't Pauline ideas. These come from Plato. And these were argued about greatly as the councils of the ecumenical councils were going on, and as the Bible was being shaped and written and put together and formulated in the first 500 years or so of since Jesus. So I think it's very difficult on those two counts, at least for me, to say that Paul has had this influence that you're kind of trying to paint him as having. Would you like to respond to that? And then I'll let Jamie talk to you for a while, because I've been going on for a little bit.
Definitely Christian theology has been shaped by Greek thought. I just want to say that the reason it's spread so much across the world, like over 1 billion people share these ideas, is because of the Christian church. So it did get mixed with Paul's views, but Paul's the only reason that Christianity dominated the world and not Judaism, so it's not a minority. But no, I agree. It has been shaped by other factors.
And what I'd like to sort of comment on, and I want to kind of get into your, because you say you lived by, or you lived or live by Pauline philosophy. Now, for me, as a secular free thinker, rationalist, empiricist, I find the Greek philosophy far more axiomatic, far more foundational. Things like the laws of logic and things like that, which massively predate Christianity. And I take very little, if basically nothing, from biblical philosophy, and many of the things that occur in biblical philosophy that I can get on board with, such as like the golden rule, as problematic as that can be sometimes, because it is, I think, a slightly arrogant look at morality. But that's where I draw, like, from philosophy to guide my thinking and my life. How does Paul guide your thinking and your life? What specifically Pauline ideas or notions did you live by, or do you live by?
Yeah, as a teenager, I didn't party. I didn't pursue relationships. So I practiced hard celibacy because I heeded Paul's warnings about the end of the world and the final judgment. So I didn't really enjoy my life like that. I went to church and practiced extreme devotion. So I didn't really build finances. My focus wasn't on building finances. And I have kids now, and it's actually really rough. It's really hard when you don't have a good amount of money. So it hasn't really been very useful for this life, but it's really useful for the next life.
But didn't things like Stoicism and things like that occur? Like, weren't they core to certain Greek philosophies and Greek societies? I mean, the idea of Spartan living is very much a Greek concept. So these concepts of living frugally, abstaining from vice, etc., may have been like, we should do these because the end of the world is coming. But the ideas in and of themselves are not new and are not exclusive to Paul, and I think would still I believe would still have spread, even if Judaism or Islam or any other religious bent, or in some weird parallel dimension, secularism had actually ruled the day from back then, rather than religion. I think these concepts and philosophies would still have propagated.
Probably.
Okay, Paul. Sorry, Paul. It's because we're talking about Paul. Andrew. Andrew. I just want a bit of clarification. This might be just me being a little bit thick, but you seem to be indicating that following Pauline principles has actually set you up to be in a place that's not particularly fruitful now that following those principles has kind of come to fruition, that you practiced this celibacy when you were younger and you didn't save money and things, and now that you have had children and you've not done that, it's actually a detriment to you. Am I following that correctly? If I'm not, please correct me.
Yeah, pretty much.
So
anxiety too, worrying about the end of the world didn't really help my mental health either.
Yeah. So in that case, is it? And I'm just trying to kind of figure this out in my own mind, because I'd interpreted what you were saying as being that Paul was the best of all the philosophers. But is that not what you are you saying that, or is that not what you're saying?
I'm saying that he just won the battle, that he just beat them all out. Like his Christianity pretty much dominated the way we think and the way we live for millennia, because he kind of just beat them all out. So like I was kind of like I kind of like almost like had to live by his teachings because it was the greatest influence.
Right. I think I get
like, and so doesn't that indicate that his teachings are probably the most true?
Well, I don't know, because like only about a third of the world, even at its height, about a third of the world was Christian, which is a lot, but there are lots and lots of non-Christians out there who went by philosophies of a similar type. I mean, Confucianism and all kinds of stuff came out, and Buddhist. Well, Richard will be able to tell you more about this, but the ascetic lifestyle of Buddhism and letting go that which is material and severing your connections to the world is, I believe, quite core.
Which actually, incidentally, by the way, some scholars believe that the Buddhist philosophers may have influenced the Stoics, who influenced Paul. Mm. So it's one big circle. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's it. That was basically my point, and the fact that, like, yes, you may have been introduced via Paul, but I mean, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and popularizing something, I don't see is like, it's not a competition. Like, he didn't beat any philosophy; he just rebroadcast it with his own twist, a rather damaging twist, unfortunately. But I think it's more of a fact that you were born and brought up in a Christian society rather than in any kind of Eastern religious society or Islamic society or anything of that nature, where you probably would have been hit by the same things and probably been influenced the same way. Although I don't want to sort of put words in your mouth, but I don't think we can just say, yeah, Paul made the world aware of these things, because a lot of the world was aware of it before, and a lot of the world continue to be aware of it without Christianity.
Okay. Yeah, he just had a huge influence.
How are you feeling now, Andrew? With sorry for interrupting, but how are you feeling now in kind of regarding the philosophy of Paul, considering where you are in your life in the moment? Is it something you would still continue to follow or consider following in the future, or is your philosophy and theology kind of changing because of the circumstances you're currently in? Where would you say you kind of are on a theological level, if you can answer that question?
Yeah, it's it's based on like metaphysical like facts that we can't verify or falsify. So if I knew then like we can't really verify heaven, then I would have lived more like to make this my life a little better in the here and now. If I knew that okay, this isn't so set in stone. That Paul believes that there's a resurrection, but we there's no way for us to know whether it's true or not. So I'm frustrated. I can't tell that it's false. I can't say, oh, I know for sure this is false. But I would have lived my life a little like more practically, not thinking at the end of the world if I had like read Epicurus made it to the New Testament instead of Paul. So I've kind of like lost a lot of time because of it.
Yeah, I don't think "Whence cometh God" is going to make it into the Bible, but I would just like to say that I'm hoping that you're finding a better way. I'm glad to hear that you're like you like seeking family and finding purpose in this life. These are like finding purpose and knowing how to navigate the world we live in is difficult. So quite aside from this very fascinating discussion we're having about the importance of Paul's propagation of certain philosophical ideas, I'm just glad you hopefully feeling a little bit better and living a little bit more for yourself and those around you. I'm hoping so.
Yeah. I'm trying to. I'm starting to, because like it's still like in my body. Like I used to preach it in prisons, and I did a lot of charity work. So like, but it's like it's stuck in your body. Like it's hard to get it out. Like because I'm supposed to be focused a lot more on my family and trying to just make more money in the short term. So it's not easy to take it out of you. But I'm not an atheist. Like I don't know if there's, I don't know if it's true or not. But like it's just impractical is my point.
Yeah, I think
there's so much in this life to worry about.
I think, Andrew, you're on a really good path at the minute, and it doesn't matter whether you call yourself an atheist or whether you're a theist or as that's not as important as the way you're actually assessing things, and the way you're assessing things seems to be very much on the right track. And that's more important. That's far more important for me as someone who would call myself a skeptic educator who wants to promote critical thinking in education and getting people to kind of have a good epistemologic framework. It's so much more important to me that somebody is on the right track with their thinking than it is than what they call themselves. That's far more important, and you seem to be on that right track. Andrew, I would love for you to call back again, because I think this is something we can kind of go down further and kind of talk about that epistemology and talk about the kind of way you're assessing things in much more detail. I think this call has been an absolutely brilliant starting point for that conversation. And I would love, I know you've called the show before, I'd love for you to call the show again and kind of let's take this further. I'm gonna offer Jamie a couple of words to say to you, and then I'm going to give you the final say, because you've been such a great caller, and in contrast to the Christian we had calling at the beginning of the show, this is exactly the kind of conversation we'd want with theists. It doesn't matter that we disagree. That's not what's important. What is important is that we can have productive conversations. And you're an example of that in action. And I really appreciate that, Andrew. But I'm going to let Jamie respond to you, and then I'm going to give you the final word.
Yeah. So just in brief, Richard covered the rationality and the skepticism. I'm going to come in with the humanism, the fact that you are looking after yourself and those around you, caring about your own and others' flourishing, warms my heart. That's all I want to say. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you. I appreciate the encouragement. It's just I don't know, like, if I agree with like all the points of like secular humanism, but but to show like how the damage that religion does, like the hyper religion does, it does start to crack the ship. So I just want to say thank you for your time.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Andrew. That has been, and I really appreciate calls like that. On that note, before we kind of go into more notes and things, I do want to point out for anybody who is struggling with religion, coming out of religion, that there is a volunteer-based organization called Recovering from Religion, whose name I struggled to remember then. A fantastic organization. If you are struggling with your religious belief, or if you've left religion and you're trying to navigate the waters of atheism, Recovering from Religion are a fantastic organization you can go to and speak to. They've got volunteers in many countries that you can call up and have conversations with, and they will be great ears to listen to the things you want to talk about. So I hugely recommend that. Andrew was a great example, as I said, of the difference. This shows a difference between the callers that we can have on the show. We've had 2 Christians call up today, and we've had one who has thrown vagaries out and gish galloping and tried to push a point and tried to overtalk and complained when we've interjected with legitimate criticisms. And we've had one with which we've had just a really good conversation with, despite our differences of worldview. That term that I really like, and I don't criticize at all in any way, shape, or form ever anywhere. But it just shows the difference between kind of somebody who is willing to have a conversation and somebody who wants to push their opinion. And I think that's really important. And on this show, we greatly encourage the latter. If you are a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Hindu or any manner of theist or non-theist religious person, and you want to give us a call and have those productive conversations and talk about any aspects of what you believe, whether you want to present evidence to us that you think is evidence of God's existence, or if at the entire other end of the scale, if you've never come across someone who doesn't believe in God and you just want to kind of get more of an opinion of what those people do believe in a world without that belief in God, you are more than welcome to call. We hugely encourage it. We have another super chat from Gayest Husky.
Love that name.
Not just any husky, but the gayest husky, the gayest of all huskies, who has kindly sent $9.99 and says, Paul and Christianity beat out the other philosophers and influence the world by violence, genocide, conquest, and indoctrination. That's not winning by merit. That's cheating and dishonest. Yeah, there are lots of comments, I think, like that we could make. I just want to point out as well, by the way, that the Buddhist person in the chat has said they are too nervous to call, and that's fair enough.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we wouldn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable calling the show.
I would even, despite how enver-rated we got at him, props to Anthony for actually calling in. It does take a modicum of of bravery to do so, and there's no shame in not. Like, if you don't feel comfortable calling, we ain't gonna pressure you. We would just we'd just like to talk to you.
Yeah, and if you're one of those people who doesn't call the show but still wants to talk to us, you can do that in the after show or over on where is it over on
the
Jamie?
Atheist fan Discord, ACD. Yeah.
The ACD, you can go over there. Both myself and Jamie and Kelly, the backup host, will be in there. Kelly is hosting next week, by the way, with Jimmy Jr., and that is going to be a really good show. Kelly, for those of you who don't know, is a workaholic as far as the ACA is concerned. He's one of the hardest working people in the ACA as far as I'm concerned. Great guy, and he will always, at the drop of a hat, jump in these shows to back up. Hugely knowledgeable, a geologist, a published geologist, no less.
One might say that he rocks. That's terrible. it's just terrible.
This is what you get, people, when you get two boiled eggs presenting your show. You get jokes like that. So, yeah, Kelly is going to be there as well. He's hosting the show next week. Fantastic, fantastic guy. So jump into the Discord. Talk to us after the show. You can do that. That's a thing you can do. So the prompt for this week is God made blank a sin just to be petty. Reply in the comments and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode to hear the top 3 answers. If you don't believe this is your community, we appreciate your being here. And it is a great community. We've mentioned the Discord. We've also got the fan-run Facebook groups. You can find us on TikTok. Every Tuesday, I do a show between 3 and 5 Central. Helen Green does a show shortly after that. I think it's 6 Central. And we have some great conversations over on there. So go and jump over on there. We have a great big community in which you are very, very welcome to join us, whether you are a believer or not. And we hugely encourage believers to come and have those conversations with us and join our community, even if you're not going to have those conversations, because it is a great place just for finding out more information, just for kind of getting on with people. And just, we have this Dungeons and Dragons game night that goes on in the ACA Discord fan run group, and it's, if you're into that kind of thing, it's brilliant. It's not just all about arguments and talking about God all the time. It really is a community. If you do believe, we don't hate you,
we're just not convinced.
See you next time.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.